An intellectual carrot. The mind boggles.
You see? You see? Your stupid minds. Stupid! Stupid!
Earth has had Santa Claus long enough. We will bring him to Mars.
I've been afraid a lot of times in my life. But I didn't know the real meaning of fear until I had kissed Becky.
One thing will be clear. It's not for man to interfere in the ways of God.
It's alive. Oh, it's alive. It's alive. It's alive.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Earth vs. Soup, episode, 134. I'm Aaron Pollier.
And I'm Darlene.
We are talking about Son of Frankenstein tonight. Darlene, can you talk about some of the background information for Son of Frankenstein?
Yes, I can. The budget was $420,000. It was 99 minutes long. It was done shooting in it was budgeted for 27 days of shooting. It has your two of the big names, Karloff and
Boris Karloff, Bela
Lugosi.
It actually has a third big name in it, Darlene. We cannot forget about Basil Rathbone as Baron Wolf von Frankenstein.
But every time Bela Lugosi as Igor.
It's Igor.
Comes on in that thing, he steals the doggone scene.
Okay, so Bela Lugosi. Let me say the movie poster actually has Basil Rathbone as the lead in this. Is he in the most scenes? Absolutely, he is.
He is. Yes.
Yeah, he is a very charismatic actor in this,
and he does a damn good job of playing somebody that is very. He's usually a laid-back character. You get that in the beginning. But then you see it ramping up of being...
Things are falling apart. And he is not the same character as his character's father.
No, he's Wolf Van.
Yeah. What I'm saying is he's not the same kind of mad scientist. His entire point in this film is to... it's to clear his father's name, to prove that his father was a genius and not a madman.
Okay.
And so, when things start falling apart, it's not that he's, crazed and wants to create life. It's more of, he's ashamed that maybe everyone is right about his family. Maybe everyone is right about his father. And he's horrified by it because he doesn't want to be that. It's not like he has a personal, I'm right, I can create God, I can create life, I am a God,
And he's a doctor, from what I understand, a medical doctor.
So there's a couple things we should talk about before beginning in the plot. Yeah, he's a medical doctor in this. This movie is obviously a sequel to Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. Now, Darlene and I have had a very long discussion about continuity. Now, I will say to begin with that continuity between all of these movies is loose. It is not a firm continuity.
We were having a problem with the timeline, really.
Yeah.
Because we thought we had to actually move the other two movies because this one being a son, it's got to be 30 years later.
30 or 40 years later, something like that.
Because he's got a 8-year-old son.
Yeah, but it's still whatever Basil Rathbone's age is. And obviously you can just kind of make you can make some allowances that the character is playing a younger character than they are. Because, if you go by when this movie was made, 1939, Basil Rathbone would have been 47.
Yeah, and I thought he was playing like a 38-year-old or so.
But here's the thing. We don't have to move anything around. Because the first movie, while there might be dates on gravestones and things like that, and including in Bride of Frankenstein, remember that the original movie and Bride of Frankenstein are almost back-to-back.
Yes.
And in my mind, I will still argue that they are just one movie. Okay? Because otherwise, a lot of it just... so many things from both the movies bleed together from those two. But if you just say, hey, look, This is the original movie takes place somewhere around 1900, maybe a little before, maybe a little after. There might be gravestones. I think there are some gravestones that say like 1913 or something like that that somebody died in. It doesn't really matter.
Even in this one, they have a no. It doesn't have a date.
Nope, they don't have any dates. So my idea was that, hey, look, the first two movies ignore the one gravestone, and this is why I say it's loose continuity. That the first two movies take place around 1900, 1901. Okay. Son of Frankenstein takes place in 1939. I am a little wary about that. I'd feel better saying that it takes place in the early 30s, which would then move the original movies back a little. It would have to have them move back a little further. The point is that they do, in general, together, all three of these movies do have a continuity. It's loose.
And the setting just...
Because remember, we know that Frankenstein had a daughter as well from Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm.
Yes.
But it's... The problem is, in context of these films, it's because it's something that comes up with a lot of these Universal films from the late 30s, early 40s, is that the war is completely ignored, and that makes it feel, or at least the rise of fascism. Because, I mean, hey, look, all these Frankenstein movies take place clearly in either Germany or Austria. Right?
Yeah, and this place you see feels like an out of the way, even though the train comes in. It still feels like it's out of the...
It's in the mountains of Austria somewhere.
Yeah, it's
in the Alps.
It's in a not easy to access.
Yes.
place.
Well, if when Wolf von Frankenstein arrives in the village, I know we haven't gotten into the plot yet, there is a sign for altitude, by the way.
Oh, it did?
Yeah, for the village of Frankenstein. They don't call it the village of Frankenstein. They actually have a name for the village, but it later changes to the village of Frankenstein. It's like 900 and something meters. So like 3,000 something feet up. I mean, so it's in the Alps somewhere. It's in the Alps. But the war is ignored, or the rise of fascism is ignored, and therefore it ends up having this very strange kind of timeless feel, which I think actually benefits the movie in the long run. All the villagers and all like the inspector in this movie, they almost seem like they're early 1900s, late 1800s style of dress. The only people that ever, in all three of these films, the only people that ever seem to exist outside of that are the Frankensteins. And I'm not talking about the monster, I'm talking about the family of Frankenstein. Because in this, Basil Rathbone wears some interesting suits.
And then there's Elsa wearing gowns and stuff.
And those seem contemporary.
Those are very contemporary. And even the kid is wearing... He's not wearing the little shorts. Or,
he's not wearing something that's like late 1800s.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. But remember that they're supposed to be they were living in England. So Basil Rathbone's playing Baron Wolf von Frankenstein. Now I guess it's because his father is dead now. He inherited
I'm going to correct you. The Baron was living, he said he lived in England. But if you listen to the conversation between him and his wife, they were living in America.
Yes, because she is American, and she thought, like right at the beginning, as they're going on this train to the village, that she is just completely blown away by Europe.
Well,
okay, fair enough.
In the background, I would have been creeped out because everything looks dead.
Oh, God, yeah. Everything is like this dead tree swamp. It looks like a chemical attack happened in World War I. It looked like no man's land, didn't it?
Yes.
Very weird. Very weird.
And I would think from in the Alps, you would have a lot of trees, a lot of...
Well, we should also...
Pine trees, too.
Yes, we should say that it was at night. Fair enough. And it was raining, so you wouldn't be able to see a lot. But what we did see was very bleak.
you'd still see
I know that,
full
Darlene.
trees.
I know that, Darlene.
You
I'm
wouldn't
just saying.
see trees that looked like, like you said, that had a forest fire.
You wouldn't see anything out the window anyway. They're just looking out there. So there's also, before we get into the plot as well, we are going to disagree firmly on another aspect of this film.
Which is
and
setting.
It's the setting. Because Castle Frankenstein does not look like Castle Frankenstein from the first two movies. It doesn't. I agree with that. But I think it is...
It was never called a castle in the first one.
It's a castle here. It's a castle here.
It's a castle here.
It does not look like the castle or the manor home in the first two movies. In this, I think it looks fantastic because it looks like German expressionism. Everything about Castle Frankenstein in this is non-Euclidean. Everything is at an angle, a strange angle, non-90-degree angles.
Yes, even the dartboard was on a angle.
It looks like the castle fell apart and then was just rebuilt without moving anything. Like, it fell apart. There's, like, debris everywhere at weird angles. And they're just like, yeah, we'll rebuild the castle and not move anything. We're just going to plaster over fallen beams. Well,
it looked like beams that were holding up the outside of the castle, and they built inside the castle.
It's very strange.
That was nothing more than...
If you want to have a modern example of what this sort of is, and this is why I think it works, because there is a modern filmmaker that uses this technique today, and it's Tim Burton. Think of Tim Burton, like think of Beetlejuice, or think of the original Batman from like 89, or think of, I'm trying to think of Edward Scissorhands. Things like that, where everything is just, it's kind of surreal, slightly cartoony. In this, it's not cartoony, but it's surreal. It's off-putting. Everything there is meant to put you off balance.
And it does.
And it does in this film. It is very well done. And now you don't like it because it doesn't look like the original castle / manor home. It doesn't look
like the manor home. And so it falls in continuity problem.
Yeah, but I don't have a problem with that. Like I said.
You don't, but I do.
Because remember, Basil Rathbone's Wolf von Frankenstein has been gone. To me, it's clear that his father died a while ago. And I guarantee you, as much as the villagers hate the Frankenstein family in this movie, that they tore that castle down. And then somebody higher up in the nobility, who's higher than Baron? A Baron, Darlene.
Earl, but that's English.
You'd have dukes still in Prussia, the German, Austrian. But I mean, again, that puts it into this weird, timeless kind of, the war isn't a thing.
We should mention that the son of Wolf von, Peter,
he's like a little kid in this.
He's a little kid.
He's a child actor.
And he was only a child actor. He did Bambi.
He was the voice of young Bambi.
He's still alive today and is going to be doing something.
Yeah, he's. I guess he's in a movie that's in pre-production, but he hasn't worked since Bambi in 1942. Like, good for him that he's doing something else. But like, if you listen to this movie, if you're watching this movie, you do hear young Bambi in that child's in that child's voice. You hear young Bambi. It's weird. It's weird. Anyway, let's talk about the plot, and we can go back into... One other thing
I would like to point out is that you have the Burgomaster, which is like the mayor, and there's a council. And let's just put it this way. I've got to put this... The court that they have is a kangaroo court.
The whole city council of the Burgomaster and all the other people, they're all dicks. Now, do they have a reason to be? Yeah, sort of. They actually sort of do have a reason to be as dickish as they are towards Frankenstein. But
do they have it against Igor?
Yeah, I'd say they do sort of. They do have reasons because Igor is a criminal.
Yes.
He was
a blacksmith.
He was a blacksmith.
Started to
he was a grave robber, which is a big deal. Morally speaking, that's a big deal, right?
And they hung him, but he survived.
He's a thief, besides grave robbing.
What did he steal?
They said, well, he kept saying, like, basically, allegedly, you know, you accused me of stealing, and maybe I stole, allegedly, you know, and he does that kind of stuff. But they hung him and he survived. Like, he was declared dead, but he actually lived through this with a broken neck. And now he has, like, this really torqued out neck. And yeah, it's played by Bela Lugosi. And like you said earlier, Bela Lugosi steals every single scene he's in. Bela Lugosi, I would argue that he should honestly be second billed in this.
Yes, because Frankenstein.
Boris Karloff should be top billed. Boris Karloff should be top billed. It should go Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi, Basil
He had
Rathbone.
less screen time than
the monster.
Igor.
Oh yeah. Bela Lugosi was on screen far more. Here's a piece of trivia for you. Okay, and I read this out of our Universal Monsters book. That supposedly this is already at the point where Bela Lugosi's career was taking a nosedive. Okay, and there were multiple people on set that when they learned that Bela Lugosi got hired for this role for Igor's part was minor. Oh, and by the way, they also wrote the script while filming.
Oh, right? In the 27 days.
But supposedly Igor's part was tiny. And they paid Bela Lugosi under his contract as it was peanuts. It was nothing. And supposedly there was multiple people, not Boris Karloff. The rumor was that Boris Karloff stood up for Bela Lugosi, but at this point they already had a really shitty relationship. It was other people involved in the movie. They said, "No, we're going to give Bela Lugosi more lines and more screen time to up his pay, because this man's an American treasure. He's a piece of filmmaking history, and most people, when you watch this film, and I can say, hey, look, I'm going to recommend this film. Bela Lugosi and other people that are in the horror industry and love these old horror films feel that this might be Bela Lugosi's best performance. I could
almost say, yeah. From what I've seen, yes.
See, I love Bela Lugosi and everything he's in. Even Plan 9 from Outer Space, where he's just completely blitzed out of his mind on heroin, and he's clearly at the end of his life.
Very clear.
He is
clean.
But I mean, what I'm saying is, even in Plan 9, like that stock footage of him in Plan 9, you can tell that this guy's an actor. Like, he's doing a good job. He is honestly trying. I think he's, even at that point, still better than many of the big name actors today. But here, he's at the peak of his game. And he rules the screen with charisma in a way that you do even see in Dracula. Like, in Dracula, he rules the scene just by his eyes. In
today, with society as we are, we actually can be sloppier.
Sure.
Especially in acting, because they can go back and edit it out and redo
Lots of ADR. I mean, they could do things like that here.
Here, they don't have that flexibility as much, especially when you're only shooting 27 days. So these actors are like acting on a stage. Yeah. You have to be top notch and on your lines, and nothing can go wrong, or it is in the film.
Yes, but our three leads in general, Boris Karloff, Basil Rathbone, Bela Lugosi, they are all on the ball on this movie. They really are. The other minor kind of actors and actresses that we see in this movie, like I said, Donnie Dunnigan as the child who played Bambi. A child actor. Did he do a good job in this? I'll actually say no. He was your typical child actor that put absolutely no emotion or pacing into it. He clearly grew in the 3 years between this and Bambi, because in Bambi, he acts. You can tell. But in this, it's not really acting. It's just a kid that has memorized lines and is saying it, right? But Josephine Hutchinson is Elsa von Frankenstein. She's not in it a lot. She does a really good job.
And she's very pretty.
Yeah, she's pretty, but I actually don't think that's... It's not a focus of the movie. Sometimes, with the movies that are later on, like 50s and 60s sci-fi movies, I'll definitely dote on, like, hey, this woman is gorgeous. Yes, is Josephine Hutchinson gorgeous? Absolutely, but it's not the focus of the movie. Whereas those later films, they might let the camera linger on those actresses longer. This, they don't really linger on her in a leering sort of way. She's very pretty, but I think her acting is what actually is kind of memorable in this. Anyway, let's get into the plot, and then we'll praise this movie and punt it a few different ways, because there are things wrong with it. We've already maybe touched on. I can't remember. We've been kind of babbling about it. There are things that I have criticisms about. So, we are introduced to Bela Lugosi's Igor immediately in this film. He's like staring through windows in the village of Frankenstein. Again, it's not called Frankenstein in this movie, but I'm going to call it that just because
At the train station at the end, it says
it's like the barony of Frankenstein or something like that. Bela Lugosi is like staring out the window. The kids are terrified of him. There's like kids running through the street. It's raining, and they see Igor staring at them. And I thought that it was him looking through like the windows of an asylum. And I saw like a sign in German that said like entrance is forbidden in German. I think that's what it said. Again, I'm not a German speaker. The only German I know is from war films. So I know how to ask for a cigarette and,
and scream
and scream. Mein Leben. Yeah. Okay. So, it's a rainy night. The town council is talking about how there's a new Frankenstein that's arriving that night, and he is to receive his heritage. Now, this is the town council with the Burgermeister. They're all
they're all against.
They want nothing to do with the family of Frankenstein. Not that they really have a choice, do they? Because this is still clearly imperial style Germany, Austria, Hungary kind of. Like, hey, if a baron wants to come in and sit at his barony property or whatever the hell you would call it, the manor home, he has every right to do that under whatever law that they're talking about, because obviously they can't stop him from coming. They can't. They say we have to have him here, but we don't have to like it. So they all we're introduced to the new Frankenstein with his American wife. He knows his father was very badly treated at this village, and that the monster was a victim. He knows about the experiments that his father did, but he considers the monster a victim of ignorance.
Which he was.
He was. Until you watch Bride of Frankenstein, where he's a bit of a dick. After the killing, after the blind man's cottage gets burned down.
Yeah, but at that point, how much of his reaction is because of somebody else's
yes, but
action?
Again, I think the monster has a choice on a lot of the stuff in Bride of Frankenstein. He just chooses to do that. Now, in this, the monster's kind of the villain too.
He's very much the villain.
He's under control, but...
And that puts you into the mindset that in
What, Bride of Frankenstein?
Bride of Frankenstein, his emotions are what's controlling him.
This is, I think Igor has spent 20 years conditioning the monster. Like, this is mind control. This is like Manchurian Candidate kind of stuff. We'll get into why that is. So they arrive at the station. The inspector is there. And this is a character that appears as a parody in Young Frankenstein, the inspector, the guy that has only one arm and plays darts. Do you remember Young Frankenstein with Gene Wilder?
No.
Putting on the Ritz and the monsters dancing. You need to watch that film. It is brilliant.
I've watched it before. I'm just
there's a parody of that character. And this is he has like the fake arm, and like, anyway, the inspector is there, the Burgermeister is there, the city council is there, and Basil Rathbone comes out and does this speech. Is like, I'm not my father. I know that you have had awful things happen to you. And the villagers just start walking off like, screw you. I don't need to listen to your crap. And in the end, he's like talking to the police, the inspector, and like maybe like one villager who just kind of shakes their head and walks off after a bit. Like, it is very clear the villagers wouldn't piss on him to put him out if he was on fire.
Well, like, yes. And I want to say this is because it's let's think of the villagers from his father's time. They probably felt a bit guilty of what the shit they did. And what do you do when you feel...
Do they?
Let me give this.
Okay,
what do you do when you feel guilt?
You put blame on somebody else.
On somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
So they put blame on the monster.
I don't
where
think
they think they did. And what did they do to their kids?
Ingrained into them this belief that the monster was evil, that the Frankensteins brought pain and suffering. But here's the thing. They're not wrong. Yes, the villagers were the villains in the first movie. The villagers are the monster. And that's why the original Frankenstein is still the best 10 out of 10 kind of movie. It's man's inhumanity to man.
But Henry in the second film was being forced by that.
By the doctor, like, what's his name? God damn it. Anyway, is what I want to say, like Dr. Faust, but it's not Dr. Faust. It's Dr. Pretorius. That's his name. Yes, he's being forced in that, but the monster is a villain in the last half of Bride of Frankenstein. So are the villagers wrong in this to feel that the family of Frankenstein has generally brought bad things to happen? Yes, they're just as much as at fault.
Am I at fault if my mother...
No, you're not.
So why should he be at fault because of his
I'm not
father?
saying that the villagers are right in feeling that Wolf von Frankenstein's a bad dude. I think they have a right to feel that the Frankenstein family has brought problems. They
loved the father of Henry.
Yeah, Henry's father, yeah. He was a good guy, even though he was a dick. He treated everybody like garbage. But he allowed them to have booze all the time. He gave them booze out of his cellars. Maybe that's the only reason the villagers liked him.
I mean, he looked down at all the villagers as plebes.
Yeah, he did. It's weird. Anyway, so...
and Henry didn't treat him that way.
He ends up getting... Wolf von Frankenstein gets like a box of... This is a welcome thing.
2 boxes.
Yeah, 2
One
boxes.
One is the box that has all the papers.
Yeah, it's like the last will of Henry.
The big box is all the ledgers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The small box is from his actual father.
Mm-hmm. And the small box has all the notes of his father's experiments.
Yeah. And the one thing I'm going to say is this Inspector Krog.
Okay. Krog, yeah.
He's wearing an artificial arm because because when he was a kid, his arm was ripped. His real arm was ripped off when he was a kid. Now, we don't see that in...
We don't have to see every single attack in Frankenstein or Bride of Frankenstein. He said as a kid he had his arm ripped out by the root by the monster. And there's no reason to disbelieve him.
That had to have been in the second movie, not the first.
Yes. By the way, the actor is Lionel Atwill. He died in 1946. I mean, he was still old. He was like 61 in 1946 when he died, but he was Dr. X in Dr. X. So, I mean, another one of these weird...
one of the things we need to do.
Yeah, one of these movies we need to do. He was in Man-Made Monster.
We could do it next.
We could do it next time. Maybe. He was Moriarty in Sherlock Holmes and the Secret Weapon from 1942.
Who wasn't Moriarty in these things?
All these people are like all... Well, I mean, what I'm saying is there's lots of weird Sherlock Holmes connections in this. Anyway, he says he had his arm ripped out. We didn't see it on screen, thankfully, because who's going to shoot a kid having their arm ripped off? That's crazy. That's not going to be shown on screen.
But...
So the next thing is...
Who's to say that it wasn't because of the village that the kid got his arm ripped off because they pissed off...
Baron Wolf is in awe of his father and his work. He reads his father's last letter to him, giving him all the information he needs to continue his work. And this is where we're kind of shown the interior of the castle, where it's this German expressionism, this weird, like, Tim Burton-esque... Oh,
and don't forget the door knocker.
The door knocker is like 3 feet wide. It's like 3 feet wide with a giant ring, and it just... Thank you, Darlene. We get the idea. like the inspector, when he comes, he has to grab it with both hands and move it because it's so freaking big. But I think it's there to, again, this is a way to show through cinema that Castle Frankenstein looms large over these villagers, that it's seemingly intimidating. It's bigger than life, that the villagers firmly feel like it is too influential.
And the inspector actually says, because they were talking about getting at the table for dinner,
Mm-hmm.
they were talking about getting a bell.
Yeah.
Because she couldn't stand that
giant knocker
sign because it just rings all the way through. And the inspector says very intensively that it's probably because back when it was in the Middle Ages, you wanted to warn everybody
that somebody was at the door
in the castle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I get it. But I mean, all the weird things in this movie that I know you will be criticizing, to me, is cinema shorthand that actually tells a bit of a story. The interior of Castle Frankenstein, nothing is at right angles. Everything is leaning. It's there to show that there's madness inside these walls, that everyone should feel off-center, that there's nothing ever right that comes out of this place. Do you see the cinema shorthand in this?
I see that, okay. But I'm just like...
So the inspector arrives. He tells the Baron that is that he is protecting him from a poison that is his family's name, that he can protect him from the villagers because the villagers are not wanting to be hung for attacking Baron von Frankenstein, but the inspector wants to try to protect him from himself and says, look, here's my arm. It got ripped off. He resents that his entire life has been changed by this event, that he wanted to become a soldier, that he felt that he could be a general in the army, because that's what he always dreamed about as a child, was becoming a soldier and becoming a general. And the inspector does come off as kind of a very no-nonsense professional all the time. So he's not like, it's not like he's ever imagined himself as being like this overly officious prick officer. It's more of like, yeah, he is kind of a leader in a way, and he knows how to actually talk to people. And I'm going to skip ahead to one scene that I actually thought was a fantastic scene, and it's when he is talking to Peter von Frankenstein, the child. And Peter immediately says, "Are you a soldier?" And the first reaction from the inspector is him kind of like setting his face, you know, in a way like he doesn't want to show any emotion because it actually seemingly hurt him a little bit. And he goes, "No, I'm not." And he's trying to be kind to this child. And I think, what was it? Elsa was there with him. And Elsa was like, "Peter, no, we're not." But Peter's a child, and he keeps going, and he says, "Well, if you're not a soldier, you must be a general." And that's where the inspector changes. That he actually holds himself up a little higher and gets a slight smile in his face. And I don't know if you notice that, but it's these little tiny pieces of acting that come in where it's like he's getting upset at the kid because he's reminded of his lost dream. But then this child thinks that if he's not a soldier, then he's a general. And that made him feel good for a moment. And that's why I think the inspector never gives Frankenstein more crap, because he's like, I actually like this kid. He's still very aloof, but he's never disrespectful to Elsa or Peter, the kid. Anyway, let's see here. So there are ropes to a hatch up in a tower. So Wolf is going to explore the family grounds. He finds this watchtower where all the experiments were going on. And in the end, we have Baron Wolf finding Igor, but also the monster.
Well, Igor takes Wolf to the catacombs.
Yes, where there's his father's grave, his grandfather's grave. And on his father's grave, Henry's grave, it says like Henry von Frankenstein.
And in chalk, it's written as
Maker of monsters.
Monster. And Wolf takes the torch, marks out the monster, and puts man.
Yeah, and I'm like, okay, I'm down with that because
this
again,
is
like
a signal to how he thinks about it.
Well, but again, it's true. If the villagers hadn't treated the monster like crap, he wouldn't have been the monster. He would have been a man.
Yes, if
But-
they treated him like the...
They treated him like a person.
If they treated him like the hermit of the blind man.
Yeah, in the second
then
movie.
He would have been...
a loving person. Because he came across as being a person that actually had love in his heart and joy.
And they even in this one go about talking about it was a mistake by his father's assistant.
Oh, to get the brain that's from Abby Normal. Yeah.
And I'm at that point going, no, that's not the case. It's that how the villagers treated him.
Well, it's both. But it's not Henry's fault. None of it is Henry's fault. That's the thing.
Henry's fault was doing something that was considered
immoral. Yeah, immoral. So let's see here. There's a hot spring underneath the ruins that has become toxic.
Which puts us in a bad part when it's in the...
when it's Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, because there's like an ice cave underneath. Yeah.
So I'm having this problem of all this filmage, not continuity crap.
Igor explains that he was hung and that he had a broken neck but didn't die. He shows the family crypt, and the monster is laying there on top of crypt and is still alive. But Igor explains that it's more like he's asleep.
Comatose.
Yeah. That he can open his eyes, he can move his arms, but it's kind of like his batteries are low. That's basically what it is. And we also learned that Igor has been taking care of the monster for however long it's been since Henry died.
And it's his friend, so he wants his friend back because that's the only friend he can have.
Yes, because everyone else treats Igor like crap because...
Igor is crap.
Because Igor is crap. But it's here that I will say is the Manchurian Candidate stuff. Because to me, in these decades that Igor has been taking care of the monster, I think Igor has planted things in the monster's head, because we see Igor controlling the monster later on.
Well, I was thinking of Stockholm syndrome when this happened. This stuff.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So the village council at this point bitches about how Castle Frankenstein is quiet, too quiet. Like there will be no pleasing the village council, right? Obviously, and they say, well, there's boxes that are going into Castle Frankenstein.
Yeah, there's equipment being brought in for the lab, is the tower.
Yeah, so obviously time has passed. We see Wolf winch up the monster into the lab, and he starts doing experiments, tests on the comatose monster.
And this is where you see that he's actually a medical doctor.
He's a medical doctor.
How he's examining is different than how his father examined.
So this is going to be one of my gripes at this point about the movie. We learn some simple facts about the monster. He has blood pressure. Even being comatose, he has a blood pressure above 300 over 220 and a pulse of 252. And Wolf von Frankenstein says, no human heart could function like this. And my immediate note was, no shit, Sherlock, which is funny because Basil Rathbone played Sherlock Holmes. Ha! The monster seems to not have any human biology at all anymore. Like,
yeah, you
and
said
I was like, oh, come on.
Are we really wanting to tell you what the...
They take the monster's blood, and it's blood cells with sperm cells. You can see the sperm cells. And it's like, what the hell are you trying to say? That the monster made out of human parts, all human.
I could see this for the Bride of Frankenstein because of the...
Oh, the homunculus stuff?
Oh, God.
Yeah, Darlene, really? Wow, okay, I didn't even put that.
I didn't go there.
I didn't go there. That's awful. Like, okay, yeah, the bride's blood. I guess that might make sense.
But it didn't make sense.
But it
to
doesn't
this
make
one.
sense with the monster. Somehow, nothing about the monster is human in this movie, which made me go, F you. Like, the whole point of Frankenstein is that, yes, he's been stitched together, but he is human.
He is human parts.
No, it's not just human parts. He is human. He has a human soul. Everything about him is human. It's just that he doesn't look right because he is
Put
wounded.
together.
Yeah, he's put together out of parts. So,
And I will give it to Karloff. He did it again where he took out his bridge.
oh yeah, the sunken cheeks in this movie, because he doesn't have to talk in this again. They like, one of the things I read is like they just don't explain the fact that the monster can no longer talk again, because he could talk in the Bride of Frankenstein. And I'm like, okay, it's fine. He has more brain damage. He's been really badly hurt in the second film, Bride of Frankenstein, and he's been comatose for decades.
Maybe he hasn't had enough oxygen to the brain.
So I don't have a problem with that. So Karloff took out his bridge work, so he has this really sunken face, and it looks really good. So Wolf is saying many times that the monster isn't human, that nothing about his biology is human. F you, movie, he is human. They turn on all the machines to bring him back. He wakes up, goes back to sleep. The inspector has lunch with Wolf's wife, and we have the inspector and the Baron talk about how the sulfur springs that are below the tower are too hot to use as a health spa, but it was used like back
from Roman age.
Yeah, the Roman age, but it's become toxic overall. So the monsters, and it ends up being gone from the lab, but he seems to come out of the sulfur pit, which is
and this is the part where they talk about how hot it is, that if anyone fell into it, they would be cooked.
Yeah, because it's
instantly.
boiling sulfur. The monster ends up seeing his reflection in the mirror, and he freaks out, but he slowly gets used to it. And we learn that through dialogue that Igor is clearly using the monster for his own ends at this point.
And it happens to deal with how he plays the flute.
Igor, plays a flute and basically controls the monster's actions. Because remember, the monster does know that killing people is wrong, that in general he will only kill to defend himself, except in this movie, where he just, I hear a flute, I'm going to go out and just murder people by tearing them apart.
Well, he didn't even do that with the first one. He punched him to knock him out and then have his wagon run him over.
Yeah. Like, it's complex thinking.
It's complex thinking, so this has to be Igor, not
the monster. But I mean, we do see the monster doing these things. Like,
yes, like he's told what to do.
Yeah. So Benson the butler ends up being missing. Igor says that he ran away because he saw the monster moving around, but it's clear that Benson has been killed by
Igor,
and by Igor controlling the monster. Wolf just can't prove this fact, but even Wolf at this point is like,
because they couldn't find him.
And this is where we really start seeing Wolf questioning everything, where he's starting to feel even more and more unsettled because nothing seems to be under his control. Nothing about this.
And the actor really plays being
Basil Rathbone.
a skittish.
Igor keeps playing music on a recorder, and the monster breaks into an apothecary and murders the person that runs that. The inspector believes that the monster has been brought back, and Wolf goes back to the lab and sees the monster laying down. So he's like, I don't know. Everything about this seems really fishy. I can't find Benson, who's been my man
assistant.
It's more of it's more than a servant. He is an assistant.
Yeah,
yes.
Because he was the one that assisted helping Frankenstein, and that's why Igor got rid of him, because he didn't. You knew the next person that Igor was going to kill after the Bergman.
Yeah,
was going to be Wolf.
So Wolf decides that he's going to kill the monster while he's laying down, but Igor stops him. Igor admits to having the monster kill the village council, members of the village council, and the inspector tells, later in another scene, the inspector tells Wolf that he's under arrest just because the way that Wolf is acting, which is all like very skittish, scared. Look, I'm putting you under arrest for your own protection, but also because I know you know something that you're not telling me. You know who's doing all these killings.
Yeah, he said, I'm wearing my hat.
Yeah, because up until this point, the inspector has taken off his hat out of respect for the Baron and his family as a guest of his home. But he has refused to do so on this occasion, which I thought was a nice touch. He's like, sir, I am wearing my hat. I am here as official business. I have to put you under arrest. And then finally Wolf says, no, you know what? Igor did it. Igor's doing all this. He's somehow controlling the monster.
Does he actually say he's controlling the monster?
Yeah, that Igor is controlling the monster. Wolf ends up shooting Igor in the lab. We have the inspector finding the secret door and the body of the servant in there, of Benson.
Oh, that's okay. That's where Wolf actually tells the inspector that he killed Igor.
Yeah. The monster takes Igor's body to his bed, and the monster freaks out and throws equipment into the sulfur pit, and then kills... He kills one of the maids, right?
No, I don't think he killed... He knocked her out.
Okay.
He knocked Emily out, but didn't kill her because he went to go get the kid for some reason.
Okay. But the monster then goes to... takes Wolf's son and brings him to the crypt. The monster gets gets kicked into the sulfur spring there and dies. The Frankensteins then leave Austria-Hungary, Germany, whatever. The end. Because it's like, this is all bad news. Now, there are things that we love in this movie.
This is one that's going to come and play next movie.
For our review of Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman,
because
now things don't make sense.
They said that they gift the castle and the holdings to the village.
Mm-hmm. But that doesn't happen in the next film.
That doesn't happen in... Well, we don't know if it happens in the next film, but it doesn't happen in Frankenstein versus the...
That is the next film in this series.
No.
Isn't it?
No.
Because the Frankensteins still have their land in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman.
Right.
So maybe the village never took it because they just don't want anything to do with the Frankensteins. They're like, screw you, I'm not taking this. So, Darlene, what works?
The acting.
Yeah, the acting is top notch.
Bela Lugosi. Karloff.
Basil Rathbone was fantastic. The only acting that I didn't think was honestly that good was Peter von Frankenstein, the kid, because I think he was just...
But that's a kid actor, and I really thought that was pretty good for a kid. Yes, you got Ghost of Frankenstein.
Oh, yeah, we haven't done Ghost of Frankenstein. When's Ghost of Frankenstein? 42?
42.
Okay. Yeah, and then Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman is 43, because it's mid-war.
And then you've got House of Frankenstein 44.
Yeah, but we haven't reviewed that yet. So we still have one more Frankenstein movie to get to the point where we've already reviewed another Frankenstein movie. I know we did some of these out of order, but that's okay. So yeah, the acting worked. I thought the sets were great. I don't care if they don't match what the Castle Frankenstein or the Manor Home was in the first two movies. The point is that the sets help tell the story. The sets help tell the story of this movie.
If you knew what they were trying to tell.
Which you would if you understand cinematography. It's supposed to make you unsettled. It's supposed to make you feel off-center. Like, it does. And I think that's what, when you're griping about it, that's exactly the point of them trying to do that.
I also kept on seeing that there's a 5 to 8 year old child. Mm-hmm. And all the rails on that, he could just go right underneath and fall out.
There's weird staircases that seemingly just jut out over open rooms. Yeah, but again, I think that's there to make you feel like...
You stopped the film at one point. Okay? And then pointed out the fact, goes with what you're trying to say, that the only right angle in it was the door.
Those rails on the stairways that come out over the open room, you fearing for that kid is the appropriate reaction that they're trying to give you, in that kid could just run right off it. You're fearing for the kid. everything about these sets is designed to make you feel off, to make you feel worry. And that's why I think it works. It's actually to me, it's some of the most brilliant set design in any of these movies.
The only problem I had was it doesn't deal with continuity.
Is it overly ornate? No, because I actually think I like the Hammer horror ones better aesthetically. But I'm saying for storytelling purposes, these sets are very, very empty, very plain, but they work.
And even her heels clicking on the...
And echoing. Yeah, echoing. See, it's everything about these works for the story. It might not be the prettiest, it might not be the most aesthetically pleasing, but it is direct and to the point. And that's what I appreciate. I think it works. What's another one of your things that you like? You said the acting.
I said I didn't like that part.
What was the second one besides the acting?
Oh,
because we're going to disagree on things that we like. My first one was the sets. What's your second thing that you like?
Well, I'm trying to think. Go ahead with yours.
My second thing that I like is I do like the makeup and costuming in this movie. I think it is, again, it's simple. It's not overly ornate. Obviously, they did a good job with the Frankenstein makeup. With Boris Karloff, I appreciate that he took out his bridge. It makes him look more monstrous with his sunken cheeks.
And then they put in a piece in Bela Lugosi that made him talk funny.
They put sharpened teeth in Bela Lugosi's mouth.
Oh.
And I mean, his makeup looks great. But I mean, everything about Bela Lugosi is fantastic in this movie. It's absolutely everything's about him. But I mean, it's not just the acting, it's his stage presence. It's the way he moves. It's the way he commands the scene.
How he did that with his shoulder all the time.
Yeah. I mean,
because that wasn't just patting on one side. That was him scrunching his body.
My second thing would be costuming and makeup. I think really does work well in this. It's simple. Like Basil Rathbone, when he's near the end of the movie, he has this like simple suit on, but it actually has different colors of fabric on it that makes it. It suggests a body shape that is not his. Remember in Strange New Worlds, which is one of the new Star Trek shows, I pointed out that the female uniform has these black sides to them.
And the males don't.
And it's because the black sides suggest a narrower waist. It suggests more of an hourglass shape when even if the actress doesn't have that exaggerated shape. It suggests that. So here we actually have Basil Rathbone having something similar where his waistcoat actually has a curve to it. It actually it's like straight up and down near his waist, but then curves out.
Yes, it did.
And
I didn't even notice
strange. It's there because to me it's strange. Again, it's another one of these choices of lines and angles that you would normally see on a man's waist jacket like that, not curves. You would see like a straight line or up down kind of things where it doesn't fit. Again, it's one of these things that it makes you feel like Wolf von Frankenstein doesn't fit.
I can see that, and also the Bergermans always had very bleak clothing.
Mm-hmm.
They were a bunch of bleak people.
Yes, and they all sat at desks that were tall and narrow at the bottom and wide at the top. Again, if you know like these Tim Burton type films, it's a very Tim Burton-esque set, but it's there to make you feel off balance that you're going to fall over. It's all of that. All of that links together. Now, have you thought of a second one that you really like in this?
Not really.
Not really? See, I don't know. I think there's lots of little things that work. I like the set. Well, I've already said the sets, but I liked the idea of these, of the sulfur pit. Even though it doesn't fit into later films, I kind of like that here's this old ancient like Roman era bath that was used as a health spa back in the day, but has slowly heated up to become like this sulfurous pit. Okay, that's interesting. Obviously, we know that the monster is going to get thrown into that and somehow survive, but
Well, he's not supposed to have survived.
he's not supposed to have survived any of these films, but he does. So that's fine. It's a conceit that we have to kind of say happens in these movies. Like, hey, it's a Flash Gordon serial. Flash Gordon gets killed by crashing his rocket into a moon. How is he going to survive? Well, he does through whatever Deus Ex Machina that occurs. Yeah, right. So what doesn't work, Darlene? You say the sets. That's one of them. What's another one that you say doesn't work? Because I'll disagree about the sets.
I didn't like the sets because it just didn't fit with continuity. So I guess the thing is not the set, it's the continuity.
You don't think the continuity works?
That's
fine.
I don't think going from one movie to the other that it actually...
That's fine. I
so
still don't...
So it's not the set it's the continuity.
Okay. It just doesn't seem to fit with the other two movies.
Right.
I'll say I don't disagree with you, but I also don't agree. It's okay and that's fine. Like, I see what you're saying, but I don't think is as big of a deal as to make it like a big strike against this movie. I do see what you're saying, though. I do see what you're saying. So continuity in general. What else? Is there anything else that you think doesn't work?
But I think all the things that I have a problem with is the continuity between the things that I don't like.
I just try to judge these movies on their own because the continuity is always going to be very, very loose. It's always going to be really loose.
But that's one of my problems with today's movies.
I have higher expectations for things today because it's easy to just look things up. And that's what makes like continuity errors in these days.
But you have some of the same players.
I know. I'm not going to disagree. I just don't think it's a strike against the movie. It doesn't help the movie, though. It doesn't help. Is there any other kind of like doesn't work that you really liked or you wanted to point out?
Well, like I said, I really liked. Well, Bela Lugosi stole even the scenes from Karloff.
Yeah.
When he was on stage.
Absolutely. He's a great for a reason.
I like that even though I usually like to have a strong female figure, I like that she was just...
She wasn't a damsel in distress.
She wasn't a damsel in distress, but then she wasn't in the face. She wouldn't go against her husband. She was more worried about her child. And I liked that Emily, which is the nurse.
Amelia.
The nurse. The child tended to... So she was a socialite. It kind of told you she was a socialite in the beginning, where the kid goes, are we going to be with Amelia again?
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing when he walks in the door, he doesn't care about his surroundings. He goes straight to
Amelia.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
So it puts you into the fact that she's
she's a very kind person.
She's a kind person, but she's also a socialite.
I don't think you're using that word properly.
She's
sociable. That she's friendly.
She's friendly, but she's also in America. She went
around. She had lots of friends.
She had lots of friends, so she was
an extrovert.
Yeah,
that's fine.
So that makes her very unhappy here.
Yes,
as well.
But she's also not really showing that. She's just happy to be with the family and taking care of Peter. Do we recommend this movie? I do. I recommend it. It's not as good as the first two. But again, I always, like I've said before, I combine Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein into one movie because they pretty much are. But it's not as good as those. But it's still good.
It does have a plot. It
has a plot. Bela Lugosi by himself is enough for me to recommend this movie.
It has good acting. It has a plot, which is something I can say about some of these films that don't.
The German expressionism in this is fantastic. You might not like the sets continuity-wise, but from a design perspective and movie-making perspective, Darlene, come on.
It's kind of simple.
Yeah, it's super simple, but that it needs to, it's that's all it has to be for this.
So I guess I'd say okay to watch.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like a strong recommendation.
No.
Me, it's more of like, yeah, it's a mild recommendation because it's not as good as the first two movies, but it's still good. It still is.
If you
good.
watch the first two, then I guess watching the...
Yeah, you shouldn't have a problem with this one.
No. The only problem you'd have is the same one I have, is that...
It just doesn't look the same, and that's fine.
It doesn't...
That's fine.
It doesn't feel the same. It doesn't...
I think one of the things that a modern filmmaker could take away from this is something that Tim Burton's taken away. That if you're going to make a film that is supposed to be slightly surreal in times, or sets are supposed to make you feel unsettled, you as the viewer are supposed to be unsettled, that it shouldn't be just about the characters to do that. It should also be set design. And that's a lesson that you should be able to take away from this. That simple set design can still tell a story very, very, very well. Very well. So I recommend modern filmmakers look at that. Look at this movie for that, at the very least. I mean, Tim Burton's done it, but I think Tim Burton does it in a cartoony way, whereas this was very plain, very simple. It's stark, and it works, though. It works. Like, hey, if I want to tell a story about
Stalker did it.
But Stalker did it with decay. Stalker did it with decay, whereas this was not decay. This was just simple lines, non-90 degree angles. I said, look, the castle's non-Euclidean, right? Because it is. If you're going to tell a story about a mental asylum and you don't want to just constantly shove that there's craziness and weirdness happening inside this mental asylum all the time, don't make your doorways perfectly square. Don't make the rooms perfectly square. Make them 5 degrees off, enough there that the human brain sees these things and goes, like our house, like one of our doors one of our doors is off because it's an old house and it actually is sloped and it looks like a weird door. But you look at that door and you go, you're leaning. You want to lean one way.
I was going to say that wouldn't come off to me doing it just slight. Because my house is...
Yeah, but if you took a protractor to the door, it's not that big of a angle difference. It really isn't. It's like 3 degrees. Like there's one angle on that door that's 3 degrees.
It's enough in the middle to make it not...
That is my point, Darlene. That is my point, is that it doesn't take a lot. It takes just enough for the human brain to go, ooh.
Oh, and that might be why most people think houses are haunted.
Yeah, just they have settled in a just slightly off horizontal way. So everybody feels like, and then
they
off.
also make a lot of noise at night.
Yeah. So it's simple. Yeah, we'll leave it there, folks. Yeah, we both do recommend this film. I think we both enjoyed watching it. Bela Lugosi's a joy. So we'll leave it there. I'm Aaron.
I'm Darlene. Good evening.
And keep watching the skies.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Thanks for listening to this episode of This Week in Geek. Hungry for more? Check out our website at thisweekingeek.net. You can subscribe to the podcast, browse our Twitter and Instagram, and leave your thoughts on today's topics. If you'd like to give us some feedback, send us an email at feedback@thisweekingeek.net. Tune in next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.